Wired into technology transformation, this is the Digital Bulletin podcast.
Good day to you, listener. Thank you for joining us for what is episode 12 of the Digital Bulletin podcast. Us being me, Ben Mouncer, and my esteemed panel made up of Digital Bulletin content director James Henderson.
Good morning.
And CEO Romley Broad.
Hello.
Hello. How are we doing, chaps? James, how are you?
A little bit under the weather. I caught a bit of a nasty cold off my 13-month-old daughter. But ploughing on.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not the other thing.
That's the thing. The remote, even if you've got kids, the remote possibility of even a slight sniffle suddenly becomes a kind of plague, doesn't it, these days? And
For you, maybe. I'm quite relaxed about it.
All right, yeah, okay. Maybe that's just me. I have to check.
No panic buttons being pressed in the Henderson household just yet.
Certainly not.
Rom, how are you? It's been quite busy for us as a company recently, isn't it? Maybe without giving too much away, you want to, sort of shed a bit of light on what's coming up for us.
We're growing. Obviously, new people are joining the team all the time as well. So look forward to talking about that. We've got a number of we're beginning to travel again with baby steps, as it were. Lots of interesting projects with lots of interesting companies coming up. Big companies, very interesting people doing very big things at those companies, and it's going to be fascinating to dig in on what they're getting up to. Particularly, at the moment, everything's more interesting at the moment, especially when you're talking about topics of transformation and change management involving mostly tens of thousands of people often. How do you do that? It's hard enough in normal times, but right now it's interesting. And that's going to keep us really busy over the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Transformation is a very real topic right now, that's for sure. Now, listener, we have a jam-packed podcast for you to enjoy. James, Rom, and myself will be discussing NVIDIA's deal to buy Arm. We're going to explore our case study on Deutsche Telekom, and we're also going to hear from Ainsley Braun, who sits on the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, a little bit later on. But first, here's some news. Following the relative quiet of August and the summer holiday season, September has been busy. We have, of course, seen TikTok being courted by Microsoft, no deal, and then Oracle and Walmart, deal, well, maybe. We'll see how that one turns out. In the world of 5G, Samsung surprised some by managing to win a $6.6 billion supplier contract with Verizon over in the United States. Expect to see similar partnerships emerge before 2020 is out, that's for sure. Another big story was Klarna raising $650 million in fresh funding, making it the highest valued private fintech company in Europe. We certainly haven't seen a shortage of investment in tech in recent months. Elsewhere, Pure Storage paid $370 million for Kubernetes specialist Portworx. Ericsson, $1.1 billion for Cradlepoint, and Salesforce has promised to employ 12,000 people in the next year. That's despite laying off 1,000 staff only in August. Definitely an interesting one, that one. As you now know, listener, you can get the original reporting on these stories and a bunch more over on digitalbulletin.com. But now we are going to turn our attention to NVIDIA, Arm, and a $40 billion acquisition. Now, many acquisitions happen in our world, most pass without much controversy or even many headlines. But this one is a bit different. James, I'm going to come to you here. Maybe you can explain to our listeners why this deal is potentially so seismic for the technology industry.
There's a couple of angles around it. Firstly, we should say that Arm is a very substantial company and works with other very substantial companies. And the reason for that is that it's chip architecture. So it doesn't make chips, but what it does is develop software for chip architectures. And that software is used by some of the biggest companies in the world, like Apple, Broadcom, Qualcomm. Think of the real big businesses. So it's substantial just for that reason alone. It's a company that its software is relied on by some of the biggest organizations in technology. So that's the first reason, really. I don't know whether you want me to sort of jump into, some of the controversy already, or explain, sort of, why we're speaking about it as a controversial subject. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the controversy, there is a lot of controversy around it, and it is kind of centered, a lot of it is around ARM's unique position, isn't it? Because as you've said there,
Right.
it's kind of neutral.
Yes, its neutrality is something that it's always, flown the flag for. It doesn't mind who it works with and who its software is leveraged by. And that has sort of stood the test. It was acquired by SoftBank Group in 2016 for 31, I believe it's 31 billion. So obviously this is I don't know, maybe 31 or 32 billion. I would have to double check.
A lot of money either way.
It was a lot. It was a lot of money. So, SoftBank is selling it for a tidy profit. But what you would have to say with SoftBank is that, it's not an NVIDIA, whereas technology is absolutely core to what it does, and it doesn't necessarily leverage ARM's products. So the neutrality was something that was upheld perfectly, and it was understood by all that ARM could continue to be neutral working under the SoftBank Group. NVIDIA is slightly different, of course, because NVIDIA is a company that that uses the ARM's software architecture, and obviously there are worries from other companies that, despite insisting that it won't, that actually NVIDIA will get sort of first dibs and first looks at this at what's coming out of ARM's R&D base in the UK. Yeah. So that is one of the reasons why it's made so many headlines. I think that the former, or not the former, the co-founder of ARM, who is no longer there, I think Herman Hauser, his name is, I said this is a potentially disastrous deal. So
well, maybe. Well, it's certainly an opinion. I'm sure he's feeling quite protective. But yeah, it's really interesting what ARM does. But it basically works, doesn't it, incredibly closely with a bunch of technology companies to build bespoke kind of solutions for those people. Surely, Rom, that can't continue, can it? If they are eventually bought by NVIDIA, surely that can't continue.
Well, NVIDIA have said it will. They've guaranteed, we'll definitely maintain its independence. But obviously that's not true. I mean, obviously it's not true, because NVIDIA makes chips.
Broad and not the Digital Bulletin podcast. I think it's
well, I mean, it's literally not true in that it's not independent anymore, and so there's a reason NVIDIA have decided to go and buy ARM, and that's because they want to control the market more. I mean, it makes very good business sense for them, right? The truth is they've made lots of assurances, as far as I understand it. They've said, look, we're not going to move it out of the UK. It's going to stay where it is. There's a lot of people there working in Cambridgeshire in the UK who, that's where the headquarters are. NVIDIA have said, we're not going to move that. In fact, we'll invest in it, all of that sort of stuff. In truth, in the long term, unless those commitments are legally binding, which I think they were, SoftBank made legally binding commitments to keep things in the UK, didn't they? I think when they bought it. I don't think NVIDIA has made those kind of assurances themselves. I might be wrong. Inevitably, in the long term, this will become a part of NVIDIA, obviously, and that will go wherever in the world it makes sense for them to go. Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. I don't know.
James, you're ready to jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. Jensen Huang, I think, the CEO of NVIDIA, has said he would be prepared to make some legally binding guarantees on jobs and investments. And I actually think he probably will have to do that for it to be sort of rubber stamped, especially here in the UK. I know that our members of Parliament are going to be debating this in the House of Commons at some point, to talk about whether it's in the national interest. I wrote in our newsletter last week that obviously we are a company that looks at technology from a global standpoint, but of course we are a UK-based company, so we do take a sort of we are very interested in what's going on in the UK, and by any means, ARM is the sort of jewel in the crown of UK technology, and to see it being sort of kicked around like some political football has been, I find it quite worrying, and I think if Rom says is it a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's, for me, I certainly think it is a bad thing.
I think, just to qualify that comment, I think when I say I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing, is that it's not been a UK company for a while. It's important to the UK though, because it's here, and so around ARM has grown, particularly in the Cambridge area, an ecosystem of talent coming out of places like Cambridge University, but ultimately being able to find not just employment in that area, but employment at the very top of the chain in terms of what you might be able to do in a technology career. It's important for this country to retain that kind of thing. As long as that happens, then I don't see any particular worry in that sense. I think for the industry as a whole, it's more of a concern, because suddenly you've got a player in NVIDIA that's got a bit of a stranglehold on chip designs, and you wonder whether that over time the lack of independence there is going to affect the competitive momentum, I suppose, of the industry as a whole. But frankly, who knows? And that's why I'm quite ambivalent about it. It's more personal for me though, actually. I mean, I'm a bit older than you guys, but I remember when ARM first started out, I remember using the Archimedes computers that proliferated in UK schools that were based on the RISC architecture that ARM developed, and that was kind of the beginning of their story. And we ourselves are located quite close to ARM. I've certainly attended events and talks where the founders of ARM are wandering around and meeting people, so it's quite close to us almost. In the end, though, I'm not sure how big an effect this will have on the industry as a whole. Geopolitically, it might be more interesting, though, as you say.
Yeah, that's the next question, James, really, isn't it? That, as always, there is a geopolitical tension kind of emerging from this story between, you guessed it, China and the US. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I bet Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party are delighted to have been stuck in the middle of this, it seems, again. So yeah, obviously, ARM under the auspices of SoftBank is now very, very possibly going to be then controlled by an American company, and there are many Chinese companies that use ARM software, and obviously the worry from China is that they will be frozen out of that they won't be able to use this anymore. But the thing is that I think the China State Administration for Market Regulation, that snappy known watchdog, is one of the many regulators that are going to have to sign this deal off. So again, the powers that be at NVIDIA are going to, again, I think they're going to have to make some pretty cast iron promises to get that sort of way through. But it very much does feel like a bit of a land grab by an American company. But what I think you will see now is Beijing very much sort of looking to invest in its own domestic chip sector and being able to take things in house. I think that is we know that is happening anyway, but I think this is just going to accelerate that.
And one final point on this, gents, is what this means for NVIDIA. Obviously a huge company, but one that has perhaps been on kind of the fringes of the Silicon Valley elite. But where do you think this kind of thrusts them into the future with this acquisition, James? Because, I mean, they said themselves that obviously this is very much PR talk, but creating the world's premier computing company for the age of AI. What do you think it means for them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's been written in a nice shiny room by a PR team, paid fortunes, of course. But there is some truth to that. If indeed it is it's waved through, if they are able to get this sorted out, then not just more and more companies, but more and more of our equipment. If we think about IoT and the Internet of Things, everything around us is going to have elements of AI within it, and therefore needs software architecture in the chips that sort of power that AI. So it's absolutely true that if they're able to bring that sort of ARM architecture under the sort of NVIDIA umbrella, it's going to make them a far more well-rounded company. As you said, they'll maybe been on the fringes of Silicon Valley previously, but this very much will bring them from the fringes right into the center, you'd have to say.
Yeah, definitely. Right, we're going to leave this topic here, listener, but be sure of it. We'll be on top of any key updates in the NVIDIA ARM story. Next up, we're going to take you inside IT at Europe's biggest telco.
Find us as Digital Bulletin on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and at Digi_Bulletin on Twitter.
Earlier this month, we hit the go button on our case study with Deutsche Telekom. Our focus was on Deutsche Telekom IT and the huge amount of work it has undertaken in the last 3 years to shed its technological and cultural baggage and bring about a transformation in how it delivers its products and services. Romilly had the great pleasure of interviewing 4 of Deutsche Telekom IT's senior leaders about IT at Motion, the organization's program to drive technology and IT innovation with a refreshed approach based on speed and collaboration. Before Rom shares more of the tremendous insights offered up by Deutsche Telekom as part of this project, here is Katja Drexler, SVP IT Strategy and Transformation, CIO Office, to tell us the problems the company was trying to solve.
This was the first question we had, why we need to move. So first of all, Deutsche Telekom is no longer only competing with other network providers. So we also compete with Amazon, Google and co for customer attention. And so new technology companies dramatically shifting the benchmark in terms of development speed, customer experience and quality. And that's the reason. So between ideas and market launches lies weeks or a few months, and customer takes care of their requests with 3 clicks. And maintenance windows are for me a historical thing. So in all dimensions, we needed a quantum leap. So more and more is done by software, and software increasingly shaping the customer experience.
Agility, a popular ambition for companies in any industry right now, and something Deutsche Telekom IT was desperate to introduce into its way of working. Rom, first of all, can you give us a bit of background on the scale and ambition of this program?
Yes, I mean, it is massive. It started about 3 years ago, and it has obviously had to roll its way through the disruptions of the last 6 months or so. It's ongoing, as any transformation program always is. But Deutsche Telekom is one of the world's largest telecoms companies. It's certainly the biggest one in Europe, and almost now, since its merger with Sprint, it's certainly second placed in the US and not far off being first. There are 10,000 people working in its IT organization, and essentially 3 years ago, their new CIO, Peter Leukert, joined and realized that they were still very much embedded into a waterfall kind of way of working. It was, basically a similar way of working that they'd enjoyed, I suppose, for the last 20 years or something. Lots and lots of embedded legacy in terms of the culture, how people worked, not much diversity going on, I think, by all accounts. And it was slow. The main problem is it was slow. So they were trying to keep up with the likes, as Katja was saying, with the likes of Google, Amazon, etc., people who are much, much quicker in bringing new IT-based products to market. And they were very slow. So they said, right, we need to figure out how to change all of this. And the most important and fundamental part of that change was culture change. It was about, you can't just say, right, well, we're going to stop doing waterfall and we'll start doing, agile. And everyone's just going to turn around and go, sure, no problem. We'll start on Monday. It's not quite that easy. You have to kind of retrain everybody, especially if you don't want to go on achingly difficult recruitment drives and so on. You need to take the people you've already got, all of whom have huge amounts of talent, and encourage them and train them and coach them and work on new ways of working. And that is what they spent a lot of time talking to me about, was how do they foster and encourage culture change and attitudinal change. And then on top of that, of course, there's huge amounts of technical work that's been going on, particularly Regina Schickentanz, who I spoke to, who's the chief architect, was talking a lot about how they are changing their infrastructure and their architecture from a technical point of view to enable them to use modern tools, move to the cloud, and strip away that technical legacy that any company of that size actually kind of has to deal with. And the sheer quantity of work that they've done over the last 3 years is really impressive, actually.
Yeah, the culture side of things, and as you said, Rom, there's kind of really interesting stuff here. We'll touch on in a minute. But what were the kind of technological kind of targets, ambitions? We know that before they started this work, they were kind of burdened by a lot of things, and as you've said, and it would take them sometimes up to 18 months to launch a new product. They've brought that down quite dramatically, haven't they?
Yes. So they're now achieving as little as 3 months. So the way they've done that obviously is to adopt an agile development framework. That'll be familiar to a lot of people who are listening to this, I should think. They've built that around some things they call digital hubs, and there's a lot of those now within the organization, led by the folks, for example, that we spoke to, who are self-reliant, self-responsible. They're given objectives and they run at them quickly. They fail fast. All those keywords that we're used to thinking about in terms of agile, which is fundamentally different from how they used to work, which was extraordinarily hierarchical. When you've got an organization that big, you end up with people, experts as they're called, within Deutsche Telekom, but highly skilled technicians who are doing the actual work, being a long way away from the people who are making the decisions ultimately at the top of the chain. And fundamentally afraid of making mistakes, of stepping outside of the processes that they're being instructed to follow. Decisions would take a long time to make, but then everything else would take a long time as well from working through that process. So they've ripped all of that up and changed everything. None of that would work, of course, if they weren't figuring out how to talk to each other better. And they were very clear about that. It's how can we, if we're going to be dynamic and agile and fast moving, we need to be way better at collaborating. And so a huge amount of effort, particularly led by Katja and the people around her in that part of the business. Their fundamental job is to inform everybody and to coach everybody and to create the systems and the methods of engagement to foster collaboration and communication between people, but not just IT people from throughout the whole business, so that people on the business side, they might be in sales and marketing, they might be senior management, they might be customer services, but they're all involved in the process as part of these digital hubs. And the net result of that is it's easy to see. They're now working way quicker, while simultaneously decoupling all of their infrastructure and retiring things piece by piece, using this agile mechanism.
James, we're going to come to you. Obviously, this sort of story here of moving to an agile methodology is a story we've told before, but it's fair to say, thinking back, to the case studies we've done on Digital Bulletin over the last couple of years, this one with Deutsche Telekom really takes it up to another level, doesn't it? You were talking about Europe's biggest telecoms company, and an IT organization that employs 10,000 people. This is kind of, a case study plus, if anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. We've worked with some fairly big companies, but fundamentally change how a sort of team of 10,000 technologists and IT experts work across an organization with a footprint across Europe. The story that the four guys at Deutsche Telekom have told with Rom, it's a pretty extraordinary one. And I think that what it shows is as you said, it's a case study plus, but I think it shows that the fundamentals are still the same. And that's about sort of empowering people better to take risks and be really innovative, and to be comfortable to do that. And as Rom said, be comfortable to fail. And we've done case studies on really small companies, and right from those, the companies of 100 people that we've worked to, all the way to Deutsche Telekom, the message still seems to be the same. These transformations are really everything's ingrained in the culture, and when the culture changes to allow people to think differently and just free them up to really work, and not be scared to fail, that seems to be a theme that sort of runs through all of them, whether they're huge or SMEs. I thought that was really interesting and really telling, actually.
Yeah. Now, IT at Motion, there were kind of 5 areas of change that Deutsche Telekom IT addressed, and culture was kind of one of them, and also the thread that kind of ran through all of them. Cultural change came in many different forms for Deutsche Telekom IT, but a big part of it was to empower its people to have influence as members of multifunctional teams, rather than have them rely on the previous hierarchical management practices, as Sabine Arbecker talks about in this next clip.
For me, it was in the beginning really a movement. A slow movement in the beginning, but it was a movement, talking to the people without hierarchy, talking direct to them, ask them for their opinion. In the beginning, they were really astonished when management asked normal experts for their opinion. They didn't believe that their opinion is really asked for.
Rom, when I read this piece, one word or one theme that kind of kept coming to me was how they all talked about trust and building trust amongst employees. It's quite unusual and it's quite unusual to sort of hear how candid they were about maybe a lack of trust between people before this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do need to thank these folks for being so honest with us, because it was really interesting. And trust is, you could interpret what that means in a number of ways, but for Deutsche Telekom it was, if people don't trust other areas of the business because there's too many layers of hierarchy between them, and things get broken down, if something isn't documented in incredible amounts of detail, then I can't trust it. I don't trust the person who's done that. If they can't trust their leaders to genuinely know what it is that's going on the ground because they're too far removed from it, then you can't really encourage culture change. You can't really encourage people to work differently. And so they realized that the first element of technology change was people change, and they did that through getting people in rooms, sitting them down, building new teams in person, all sorts of fleshy, very human stuff that was absolutely central to the core mission of technology change. And I think a really important point to make as well is that we spoke to 4 very senior IT leaders, and all but one of them have been at Deutsche Telekom for 20 years or almost 20 years. And so one of the things they all had to do, of course, during this process was to internalize their own thoughts about this. That was a big challenge for them and all of the other leadership level people throughout the organization. How can they change their own ingrained habits and practices in terms of management, coached as they were within a command and control type structure, to become what they call and are extremely serious about servant leadership. And servant leadership is something that they are coaching themselves continuously on. And that is about them saying, look, I'm not going to be a command and control type person. I'm not going to set task lists and then judge people on those. It's not about KPIs that are driven by task lists. It's about saying, you're a self-reliant, self-responsible team. Nominally, I'm in charge of you, but my role here is to trust you guys to interpret the objective and deliver it. And then my job is to do whatever I possibly can to empower you as individuals to enable you to do that. Mm-hmm. And for each individual, that might be a different thing. For the super nerd in the corner, it might be making sure that they've got the new NVIDIA graphics card, right? Because that's what's going to keep them happy. But for someone else, it could be something completely different. Their job is not to micromanage; it's to support. And it's kind of the more you think about it, the more fundamental a kind of mind shift that is for the leadership level within the organization. And it was really inspirational to hear them all talk about how they had embraced that challenge themselves and taken themselves out of their comfort zone before they asked all of the people that they managed to do the same thing.
Yeah. And it's also inspirational to hear about the results as well. Obviously, the reduction in delivering products and services to 3 months is a stat. It's a figure, but these things have only happened because of this cultural change.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all well and good kind of talking about these ideas in practice, but to actually see an example where talk about them in theory, but then to see an example in practice where it's having a real impact across such a huge organization.
Right. I think just to add, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Just to add, I asked all of them one question at the end, which was, so are people happier now than they were 3 years ago? And the answer was obviously yes, but it was a kind of qualified yes. It's just, well, sometimes the fact that you're putting people out of their comfort zones, especially if they've been there a long time, makes people unhappy for a while, and that's something else you have to manage. But ultimately, once you've gone through the process, and it's taken 3 years and it's still going on, people do become happier because they feel more in control, more empowered, and so on. And that is, I think, crucial to what their next challenge is. The current challenge, of course, is to carry on doing this during a coronavirus. We wrote another article separately, actually, that you can find on the website about how they've managed to carry on doing this through the disruption of the pandemic. And I think it's key to point out is that all of the people I spoke to, all 4 of them said, look, we probably couldn't have done this. Actually, we probably couldn't have gone through this awful disruption had we not already spent 2 years changing the way people trust each other and work, because now they can actually continue without too much disruption over video conferences and things like that. Previously, it would have been a real challenge because the disruption would have sliced through the hierarchy and everything would have ground to a halt. And all of that, I think, is just really fascinating.
Yeah. Another important element that I want to touch on, Rom, is another element of this story, which is diversity. And we know Deutsche Telekom over the last decade and more have made a lot of effort to introduce more diversity to their workforce and their leadership teams. And for them, this was an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of impact 4 female leaders have had in the IT team.
Yeah. Peter Leuker himself is on the record multiple times talking about diversity and why it's important, especially if what you're trying to do is change everything. Diverse groups of people that mirror much more closely actual society are way better at dealing with change as a community, as a group of people, than homogenized lumps of one side or another. So he, I think, is on the record as pointing that out, and it's been a key part of what the transformation has involved. But as you say, Deutsche Telekom have been working on this for the last 10 years. Very publicly, they've had a very strong drive at board level to increase the gender diversity, certainly anyway, in Deutsche Telekom over the last 10 years. And the fact is, we sat down with 4 senior IT leaders in one of the world's largest telecoms companies, all of whom were women. And I think that in of itself tells you what kind of progress Deutsche Telekom has made and why they are rightly considered a standard bearer for this particular topic.
Yeah, brilliant stuff, Ron. Yeah, I mean, we must move on now, but listener, if you'd like to read, watch, or indeed listen to the Deutsche Telekom case study in full, you can over on digitalbulletin.com. Rom has done a really great job on it. I think it's some work that we're really proud of. So it'd be great if you could go over and have a read. We'll be back after this.
Power up your day with the Bulletin Brief, the latest news, insights, and opinion delivered straight to your inbox.
Our interview for this episode of the Digital Bulletin podcast is with Ainsley Braun. Braun is a director for application security specialist Synopsys, but her story goes far beyond that. She co-founded Tinfoil Security, which was acquired by Synopsys in January. She is also a member of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, a board member of the Women in Cybersecurity Council at the California Technology Council, and she holds 5 patents and 2 degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Now, our interview was on the challenges faced by women in technology, but especially in cybersecurity. And I kicked things off by asking Ainsley what drives her to try and make a difference.
I think that obviously, as a woman in tech and a woman in cybersecurity, where there aren't many women, I've seen a lot of disadvantaged folks. I also see that there are a lot of people talking about it. Obviously, I am a type A outspoken personality. So I am always happy to talk on subjects that I either want to learn more about or I think can be improved. So I think the initial way that I forayed into speaking about diversity or any of my extracurriculars has always been a drive for knowledge. So trying to understand what's going on, how other people feel. I don't necessarily feel how other women or disadvantaged folks do all the time. So I'd like to understand their perspective, because understanding someone else's perspective is just the first step to growing in your career and where you want to be.
Excellent. What kind of impact do you think you can have? Because obviously these are big issues that can't be solved by one person. So what are you trying to achieve with the work that you do?
I think that there is obviously the idea of one step at a time. If you can make an effect on one person's life or two people, then they can make an effect on another person and another two people, and it starts to cascade on itself. So yes, I might not be able to change the world completely, but hopefully I can help someone along the way. I do think that more people getting involved creates more awareness of a problem. Whether it is a problem or not always stands to be debated, no matter what the issue you're dealing with is. But I do think that the more you start speaking about it, the more people become aware, and the louder something becomes. And as it becomes louder, then it usually starts to form some change. Even if it's just at an individual company or two, it still makes a change.
Yeah, no, excellent. So first of all, Ainsley, tell us about your role on the Women in Cybersecurity Council at California Technology Council and kind of what that entails.
Sure. So I'm a part of a whole bunch of groups trying to get more women into both tech and cyber. And it's really not even just women, but more minorities and people overall. There's definitely a shortage of manpower or woman power in cybersecurity. And so part of what I do in many of the groups really stems down to reaching the K through 12 folks. So any sort of kid who's interested in technology, making sure that there are more women and girls getting interested in technology, and really looking at STEM as STEM. I personally don't like the idea of STEAM that all the schools in the US are starting to push, because adding the arts in really defeats the point of getting women into engineering and science and technology. So when you start to add the arts in, you're kind of just including everything else that existed other than history. So I want to make sure that as we start to push these STEAM ideas and these STEM ideas, that women are included in these decisions. And as a part of that, all these councils are trying to identify where can they help given their area of expertise and really where they gravitate. And CDC is obviously California based, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only group that can make a difference here.
We know these issues are particularly prevalent in technology and cybersecurity, as you said. Candidly, Ainsley, what are the challenges of being a woman in kind of these male dominated worlds?
I feel very lucky that I haven't really faced as many challenges as other women. I think the biggest challenge is surrounding yourself with people who are going to support you. So being savvy to the network that you're creating, as well as being very alert to the psychology going around you, which is difficult to do. You have to pay attention to facial reactions. You have to pay attention to just in general, who gives what tasks to whom, how much trust you gain. Are you gaining trust? I think it's the challenge that you face in any industry with any sex or any ethnicity or any creed. But I do think that you have to be a little bit more aware as a woman in cybersecurity, for example, to make sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who are going to build you up and not tear you down. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge I've faced, is making sure that I'm continuously surrounding myself with employees and coworkers, colleagues, customers even, who are going to build me up, support me, understand what I'm doing and that I'm capable of it, and giving me that trust. And I'd say that that is the first step in order to really facing any sort of challenge as a woman in this industry.
Do you have any other advice that you can give women who want to have a career in these industries, who want to excel in sectors like cybersecurity? Maybe looking back on your own experiences again.
I would say there are two pieces of advice that I would always give, which is advice I would give anyone, which is people are people. You can interact with somebody who can be a CEO of a top company, but they're still human. And treating people as if they're human and as if they're normal really allows you to understand them a little bit better as a person. And they're usually more willing to talk to you if you're talking to them as if, they shouldn't be treated above everyone else. I also think more specifically for women that being a woman or a minority is an absolute strength. Oftentimes you will go into a conversation, people, if they have a bias, will obviously go in with that initial bias, and you can surprise anybody that you're interacting with. And I think the element of surprise is the strongest asset you have. If you are a woman in cybersecurity, for example, someone might not think you are technical, someone might not think that you are able to answer specific questions. And if you're able to go in there, you understand your product, you understand your industry, and you can answer these questions, you might surprise them and end up a lot farther ahead than you would expect.
Where do you think, Ainsley, we're at on this journey, especially in security? Obviously, a lot of work is being done, but there's still a long way to go. What's your view on where we're at on this journey?
I would say we're really still in the beginning stages. I think that there are hundreds of years of women not working, not controlling things outside the house, not being able to have a very strong voice. So I don't necessarily think that we're in as bad a position as some people might say, but I do think that we are not in an equal state yet. I think that even some benefits that companies are providing of saying, hey, we're going to help you freeze your eggs, drives me crazy, because they focus on freezing your eggs, but not all the other aspects of family life. And I do think that employees, male or female, should be able to go and build the family lives that they want. But we're really encouraging women, especially, to delay motherhood, have fewer children. And if you go off, you have a big family, you really need to stay at home, or maybe you're not going to move up the ladder. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues we do have to tackle is, there is a work-life balance. People are starting to feel it with the work from home with COVID. And we're seeing more people, males included, starting to adjust to being at home with their kids. And I think this is going to help us way faster, this whole idea of the world not moving. But I still think that we're a ways away, and hopefully more experiences like this will have a positive effect and a positive side.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, though, that a lot of the issues are kind of rooted in areas that are not kind of in the enterprise, in businesses? So, you're looking at education, you're looking at societal kind of issues as well, aren't you here?
Yes. I would say, as with any of the groups that I work with, it really does stem from early development. So early stages, if you don't get through college, you're going to have a really hard time, unless, you're a hacker on the side for cybersecurity. But a lot of women will go through university, go through college, and they will focus on not necessarily the hard tech. And it's not because they don't care about it or enjoy it. There are quite a few women who do really well in this industry. But if you are raised and encouraged from a young age, oh, okay, well, engineering or building with Legos or building a robot isn't something that your family even gravitates toward, because it's not a stereotypical thing a woman would enjoy. That in and of itself really defeats the point of trying to get more women in technology later on, because we can't get more women in technology if they're not interested, if they don't want to do it, or if we really set them up to fail from a family perspective anyway.
Now, I'm really interested in your membership of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. I'm sure diversity is a subject often brought up as part of your sort of role there. Do you want to talk a bit about that, and maybe about how often you discuss issues of that we've spoken about today?
Sure. So Silicon Valley Leadership Group is absolutely amazing. I love being a part of it. I'm mostly a part of the tech council there. So we don't touch on diversity as often maybe as we should, but we do hear quite a bit about it. Obviously, it is on the foremost, it's on the front of all the big companies' minds. So how do we increase women in tech? How do we make sure we don't look bad? I think that's really a big piece to increasing diversity, is just companies not wanting to look horrible in the news. But Silicon Valley Leadership Group, I think one of the strongest things that we've been trying to do is just education overall. So even education of our member companies on cybersecurity. We do not care if you are male, female, black, white, however you want to look at it. If you need education, we're going to hopefully put together forums and conferences where we can educate you on the topic of cybersecurity or physical security or any other technology. And I think that making sure that we are providing education overall, no matter who you are, is going to help more people get involved and really want to strive for that extra step where that they can actually see a future path into something new that they wouldn't have tried before.
Ainsley, what would you say are the benefits of a more diverse organization? Because many people might say it's all about just achieving diversity, and then that's that kind of box ticked, to use a bad phrase. But there are benefits, aren't there? There are real benefits to a diverse kind of workforce.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you were saying, the check in the box is a standard for some of these large companies, no matter what. You need to have a diverse workforce. You need to have women on your board, purely because externally other people will say, okay, well, Apple, you don't do this. I'm not going to buy an Apple product. So it can affect your bottom line. But I do think that it goes way beyond that when you actually start to look at the mindsets of bringing different types of people in. There have been a whole bunch of studies of a diverse workforce allows different ideas to come in. You tend to have more innovation. You tend to catch problems faster. You tend to have a lot more collaboration amongst your team, and you end up with employees who respect a lot more. So if your employees have to learn to respect somebody who's very different from them, you end up with an employee base that is caring, typically a lot more aware of problems that customers might face, and a lot more human. And I think that human aspect is often overlooked in any industry. People are just humans. They want to be treated as humans. And the more you go into that direction, the more you create diversity and understanding, the easier it is to sell your product and really to support your customers overall.
And is it fair to say that the new generation coming through will demand more from the companies they want to work for around these issues? So it kind of, that they play a huge role in making this kind of stuff happen, don't they?
I think they do. I think it also depends on your country. In the US, we are very politically correct right now. Whether that's good or bad, I haven't seen. I do think that there will be large detriments to the workforce over time if we continue this path, because I do think that there has to be an acceptance and willingness of mentorship, whether that person accepts diversity or not, because we have to understand that there are generational gaps here. There are still people who, will put a woman in a disadvantaged position, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have knowledge to share. So I think that there are overarching changes we have to make as a society, acceptance on both sides, both the, young kids coming through, very politically correct, very open, and then some folks in the older generation, or even some folks on the younger generation, but it tends to be the older generation who might not be as open to mentoring in the same way. So we want to make sure that both sides are open to collaboration, learning, and I hope that if with that collaboration overall, it's not just the young kids coming through pushing this change. I think that we really need to start from the top and the historical knowledge and propagate through.
Right, that is it for today, everybody. Before we go, I'd like to point you in the direction of digitalbulletin.com and our sister publication, Tech for Good. There are so many great stories and interviews on both of those sites. And I'd like to say thank you to my panel. James, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Rom.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for sticking with us, listener. We'll catch up next time. Bye-bye.
That was the Digital Bulletin podcast, brought to you by Bulletin Media. Listen and subscribe to a range of podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Plug in for news, features and case studies on the very latest in enterprise technology and digital transformation.